Tonight, why Donald Trump may never face trial for plotting to overthrow the 2020 election. Prosecutors have asked a judge to drop 2 criminal cases against the president-elect, marking the end of an effort to hold him accountable. Also tonight, the search for 17 people still missing after their tourist boat capsized in the Red Sea. In Hong Kong, the crackdown on dissent, I hear from the son of media mogul Jimmy Lai, who's currently on trial there.
We've seen, when he gave testimony this week, that his mind's still sharp and his spirit is so strong. He is unbroken.
China describes Jimmy Lai as a henchman of those hostile to Beijing, but his son Sebastian says he should have never been arrested. Plus, what the UK can learn from Canada, where 13,000 people are helped to die by a doctor each year. And 2 men, 1 Palestinian, 1 Israeli, on why they teamed up to document the destruction of villages on the West Bank. Good evening and welcome to the programme. We begin with a legal victory for the man who will soon become US president for the 2nd time. Until a few hours ago, Donald Trump was going to enter the White House with a looming threat of criminal prosecution. But that's all changed. Special counsel Jack Smith has for weeks insisted he would continue to pursue a criminal prosecution. Today, he asked a judge to dismiss the case that accused the president-elect of plotting to overturn the 2020 election. But listen to this. It's not because he's unconvinced of the president-elect's guilt in inciting these riots on the Capitol, or because of a lack of evidence. Also going away, the classified documents case. You'll remember Donald Trump was accused of holding onto them after he left the White House the first time round. And it's all down to government guidance that a sitting US leader cannot be prosecuted, which means that 2 of the most serious legal threats facing Donald Trump are likely to melt away within weeks, maybe even days. Well, let's bring in our US correspondent, James Matthews, who's been following this very closely. And James, I mean, Trump's most serious legal woes appear to be coming to an end, at least for now.
Hi, Yalda. Yeah, who would have thought when you and I stood outside that criminal court in New York several months ago and Donald Trump was convicted, who would have thought we would be here today looking we're staring down the barrel of freedom from his legal woes, which is effectively where he is. Today we're talking about 2 federal cases. There are 4. We'll come on to the other state cases. But these 2 federal cases have gone away, dismissed by the special counsel Jack Smith. They relate to January the 6th, the insurrection, riots at the Capitol. Donald Trump was accused of stoking these riots. Remember, that speech that he gave, fight like hell. If you don't fight, you won't have a country anymore, he said. So they were pursuing him on that, a crime of nothing less than trying to overthrow the results of an election, subverting democracy, very serious. The other crime related to classified documents that he had in his possession, of course, as president. He was accused, he denied it, but accused of taking these documents to Mar-a-Lago in Florida and hiding them on his property, refusing to hand them back when requested, asking his staff to conceal these documents in his bathroom and in other places on that property. So these 2 very serious crimes have gone away. Jack Smith has acknowledged that because of the policy of non-prosecution of a sitting president, they cannot and will not proceed through the courts, even though they still believe in the strength of the evidence in the case against Donald Trump. So it's astonishing. Of all the cases that Americans would have wanted to see tried in an American court before an American jury, these 2 are probably the ones. There are certainly no cases more consequential given who we are talking about and the position that he occupied once and will occupy again.
Yeah, I mean, James, you've just outlined it for us, and I do recall when we were standing outside that New York court, and the seriousness of these accusations. And as you say, the special counsel says he stands by the evidence and what he's put together. So I guess the question then is, puts into doubt, I guess, the credibility of these processes and you know, the credibility of the entire sort of operation and where we are now.
Yeah, it casts doubt on the rule of law and does beg the question, if you cannot prosecute possibly the most serious crimes committed by somebody occupying high office, then what can you credibly prosecute? I might say that Team Trump are quite happy with today's outcome. We've had a statement in the past couple of hours from Stephen Chung, a spokesman for Donald Trump, and he says this: today's decision by the Department of Justice ends the unconstitutional federal cases against President Trump and is a major victory for the rule of law. The American people, he says, and President Trump want an immediate end to the political weaponization of our justice system. And we look forward to uniting our country. That's interesting, Yalda, that phrase, uniting our country, that will be tested, because you'll be aware that Pam Bondi has been tapped by Donald Trump as his pick to be Attorney General. She's somebody, a lawyer, who's spoken in the past of retribution, of pursuing the prosecutors who pursued Donald Trump. It sounds like the rule of law literally turned on its head, so we will see where she goes with that. But of course, he isn't fully out of the legal woods yet, Yalda. There are these two state cases, the New York conviction and the election interference case in Georgia. They both have issues of their own. It would be no surprise if they went the same way of the two federal cases, now defunct.
James, thank you so much for bringing us up to date there. Well, let's bring in Democratic strategist Calvin Dark. Mr. Dark, thank you very much for joining us here on the programme. I guess my question is, was this ultimately inevitable?
Hi, good to be here. Yes, it was inevitable for two reasons. One is we know that there is a Justice Department policy that they can't pursue or prosecute a sitting president, which Donald Trump will be after January the 20th. And we also know that Donald Trump has already said that that would be among the first things that his Attorney General would be ending this case. So I think the special prosecutor did what was inevitable, and he did it in a way where he can do it on his own terms. I do think it's really important to just point out, when you were reading the statement from the Trump campaign about, uniting Americans. I don't know if this is an American English thing or a British English thing, but uniting doesn't mean, from their point of view, uniting Americans. It means uniting those who support Donald Trump against its enemies, including those in this country. He talked about, this being a victory for the rule of law. This isn't about Donald Trump. I honestly couldn't care less about the legal situation of an 80-year-old, but I do care about the fact that going forward, it's going to appear to many Americans that the justice system is fair when your party's in power. And when the opposing party's in power, then it's all a witch hunt. And I think that's a horrible precedent.
Yeah, absolutely. And I wanted to get to that. I mean, the sort of precedence that this sets, it also sends a message that, if you win office, then all of these sorts of accusations and cases can just disappear.
You're right. And, a lot of, particularly on the Trump side, Vice President-elect J.D. Vance, something to that effect, that, now we're going to end the politicization of the justice system. But this is actually the politicization of the justice system. The reason we have a system is so that politics doesn't make decisions about criminal behavior. And just because someone wins an election, that doesn't change what they may or may not have done. And I don't think that, I understand that it's an unprecedented situation. And yes, the American people, we have to do some reflecting on why we would elect someone who was in that particular legal predicament. But the justice system shouldn't be bent one way or the other by politics. And unfortunately, I think that's what we've seen today.
And that's the point, right? That you're also trying to make here, is that it's not just about it being sort of weaponized or politicized, but the fact is that the justice system perhaps has failed in a massive way as well. Because, Donald Trump has described this as a witch hunt, frankly, since 2020. And for his supporters, this now proves him right.
Well, and one thing I would love to ask President-elect Trump is, when we talk about this, when he talks about it, he always talks about it in terms of, they're coming after me. Now this is ending the weaponization. Yeah. But here's my hypothetical. What if President Biden actually did commit a crime now? And after Trump is president, President Biden really does need to be prosecuted and convicted. Do you think half this country is going to allow that? No. They're not, regardless of whatever he might be guilty of, because we've set that precedent now. And so I think that for the long term, this isn't good for the U.S. justice system as much as it might be great for President-elect Donald Trump.
Calvin Dark, thank you very much for joining us here on the programme.
Thank you.
Well, I want to focus now on the crackdown on dissent in Hong Kong. You'll remember these images of huge protests back in 2019, which began to oppose an extradition law, but quickly widened in focus. Demonstrators back then vowed to fight to the death for democracy, only for China to introduce its controversial national security law, which has since been used to target activists and opposition politicians. Just over a week ago, a group of them, dubbed the Hong Kong 47, being jailed for subversion. And this man, Jimmy Lai, founder of pro-democracy newspaper Apple News, is now on trial and could face a life sentence. Well, I've been speaking to his son. Sebastian, thank you so much for joining us here on the programme. I spoke to your father before he was arrested, and he was defiant then. And I imagine, knowing the character of your father, he remains defiant now, regardless of what he's going through.
Thank you very much for having me. Yes, you're right. I mean, they've since you spoke to him, they've put him in solitary confinement in a maximum security prison for 4 years now. He doesn't get access to natural light. He's very religious. He's Catholic, and they've denied him the Eucharist as well. All of that is aimed to break him. And unfortunately, his health has gotten much worse. He's 77. He's got diabetes, so he's much more frail than he used to even 5 years ago. But we've seen when he gave testimony this week that his mind's still sharp and his spirit is so strong. He is unbroken.
He truly is. And despite being in the solitary confinement, as you say, he's a 77-year-old man, he has also become the symbol of China's crackdown in Hong Kong. I mean, when we think about what's happened over the course of the last few years, and then since his arrest, he very much symbolises Hong Kong's own story.
Yeah, it's a beautiful story where he arrived there as a 12-year-old, as a stowaway, and Hong Kong is a city of refugees that thrived on the freedoms that were put in place by the United Kingdom, and self-made man. But then after Tiananmen Square, he realised that the additional money didn't matter. In the end of the day, he had resources and he had time and he could spend it defending the freedoms of Hong Kong. So he started a newspaper with the idea that the people of Hong Kong, once the handover happened, would need a source of news that didn't pander to the powerful, didn't suck up to the government, and didn't bend the knee to organized crime and try it. So that's what him and his staff did for the next 30 years. He believed that with information, you had choice, and with choice, you had freedom. And they championed that, even though it wasn't an easy road to walk. I still remember as a kid, our house getting firebombed, people always following Dad everywhere. But they did it, and as he said, it was exhilarating because for him it was giving freedom to the people of Hong Kong. And then the national security law came down, and with that, what is currently happening in Hong Kong, the fall, so to speak, and. Everybody told him to leave, said that, you're 73, he was 73 at that point, you're a better campaigner abroad, that you're one of the main targets. And I'm sure it wasn't an easy decision, but he knew that if he left, he'd be leaving his people behind, he'd be leaving his journalists behind, and they'll be open to be targeted by the Hong Kong government.
But now he potentially faces life in prison. Do you think he has moments of regret?
So I still remember when he was first arrested in August in 2020, and then he was let out. And he was asked in an interview, whether you regret, knowing that it was the last 30 years would have come to this, would have come to you being arrested and maybe never seeing the light of day again. Do you regret what you have done? And my father pauses for a second and says, I was lying on the prison floor when they put you in detention, on the detention cell, and they give you this very thin blanket. So I couldn't sleep all night, and I had a lot of time to think. And I've looked back in the last 30 years if I would have changed anything. And then he turns around and smiles and says, I wouldn't have changed a damn thing. You know, there's a cost to doing what is right. And my father knows that he's doing the right thing, and the cost is the cost.
Is he frustrated at the response from the international community? They've been condemning what's happening in Hong Kong, and they've specifically focused on your father's case, and he has a lot of powerful friends internationally, but it is mostly condemnation and also just statements of concern. Does he expect them to do more? And is he hearing about what people are doing outside for him?
So I can't speak on his behalf on that, but having campaigned abroad to see him released, I've been incredibly grateful for the support that we've been receiving. And you know, obviously he's a British citizen, only a British citizen, but the support that we've been getting from other states, you know, including Canada, US, the European Union, Australia, as well as many other states. It's been a case where people know the story, people know that what Dad is fighting for, peacefully, you know, democracy, freedom, is not a crime and shouldn't be anywhere in the world. And they're putting, you know, they're putting their words behind my father. And you know, obviously, the case is urgent, so we always want more to be done, because otherwise he will die in jail. But so far, the support has been, you know, we've been very grateful for the support.
He's been in prison for 1,400 days or so.
Yeah.
How much longer do you think this will drag on? I mean, as you say, we saw him give testimony last week. Do you think that they're just going to sort of leave it as it is, or there will be some kind of decision that's made eventually?
I think, yeah, unfortunately, I don't think he has long. So whatever happens, I think happens sooner rather than later. You know, you mentioned 1,400 days, so 15 days and above is considered prolonged solitary confinement, and at my father's age, and given that the fact that he has diabetes, that in itself poses high risks of death. And he's been in there for 1,400 days, so you know, like a lot more than 15 days, obviously. And you know, my father's a very strong person, spiritually and mentally. But again, his body is breaking down, as one would expect. You know, Hong Kong goes up to 40 degrees Celsius in the summer, and he's just baking there in a concrete box. It's heartbreaking.
And you spoke about democracy in Hong Kong. We saw the movement over the course of the last few years, and then the way it was crushed. Where do you think that movement is now? Is it just completely feeling, you know, helpless and hopeless as a result of leading figures like your father being imprisoned, and the crackdowns continue?
So, yeah, I mean, to give you some context, there's 1,900 political prisoners in Hong Kong. And when we talk about political prisoners, it's people that you know, campaigned for democracy. You can now get arrested for wearing the wrong T-shirt or liking a few social media posts. It's dystopian. It's become a police state, and you know, in that landscape, you know, obviously they've crushed any democratic expressions. You know, including going to the Tiananmen Square Vigil in June 4th, sitting there and singing and just being respectful to people who have passed away, you know. Protesting, but they've also crushed the free press, they've crushed the rule of law, and they've crushed what used to be an incredibly vibrant business community.
That was Sebastian Lai, the son of Jimmy Lai. Now, the historic vote on assisted dying later this week on whether to approve legislation to allow terminally ill adults in England and Wales to end their own lives has prompted strong emotions on both sides of the debate. Similar laws already exist in other countries, and in Canada, it was also extended to disabled people or those with a non-life-threatening serious medical condition. Sky's health correspondent Ashish Joshi has been finding out how Canadians have been affected.
Hear that?
Yeah, I do.
She had a crooked front tooth, and I like to think of that as her smile in here. This is the one I hold at night, or if I'm suicidal.
Scott's wife Joan died 4 years ago. Cancer ravaged her body. She chose to have an assisted death here at the home.
You want to call or text tomorrow? That's fine. I'll try to keep up. I know I'll be busy. But I just want to say I love you with all my heart.
Joan told her, yep, I'm ready. And we said our goodbyes, my daughter and I and everybody. And I remember feeling her pulse. And I remember feeling the last beat.
The number of people using Canada's medical assistance in dying program is rising sharply, from just over 1,000 in 2016 when it was legalized to over 15,000 in 2023. And in just over 2 years, people with a serious mental health problem will have the right to be included. It's what Scott wants for himself.
10 years ago, I started getting this new feeling that I'm describing now. It's never gone away. It's always there. It's just dreadful. It is so horrifying. If I walked over there and touched you and gave you the feeling, you would gasp or scream out loud.
When MAID was introduced, it was only available for terminally ill people. But by 2021, it was extended to those with a disability or serious medical condition, even when not life-threatening. Dr. Coelho says in some remote communities, there is no palliative care, only assisted dying.
The Human Rights Commissioner of Canada has twice repeated warnings that they are concerned about reports of people dying by assisted dying who seem to be choosing it because their supports and services are not in place.
We're on the 47th floor, beautiful view of the lake here.
Orlando is a high-flying lawyer with a lifelong history of chronic depression. He believes he's only talking to me now because assisted deaths were illegal until 2016.
I would have chosen it in 1994. I would have tried it I would have asked for it in 2002. In 2004, you want the pain to end, right? And the last thing you need is someone in a white coat who says, well, I see it's kind of rough for you. How about we help you end your life?
The developments in Canada are being closely followed around the world, especially in the UK, ahead of a vote to decide if assisted dying will be allowed. Supporters of assisted dying in Britain say it's wrong to compare the UK to Canada because the countries have two completely different legal systems, and they insist in the UK assisted dying will only apply to terminally ill adults with 6 months to live and never the disabled or mentally ill. But Scott says after having countless therapies, he's run out of options and he wants to die. It's the only way he believes his suffering will finally end. Ashish Joshi, Sky News in Toronto, Canada.
Well, joining us now is retired Senator James Cowan, past chair and board member at Dying with Dignity Canada. Thank you very much for joining us here on the programme. I mean, this is an incredibly sensitive issue and it is reaching a fever pitch here in the UK. But of course, as our report showed, Canada has been a leader in assisted dying for many years now.
Yes, indeed. We've had 8 years of experience in Canada with this system now, and it's worked very, very well. And I think it's supported. All the public opinion surveys show that 85% of Canadians support medical assistance in dying, or MAID as we call it here. And there have been very few reports of dissatisfaction or controversy.
I guess, one of the concerns that people have here is, I mean, it's been described by some as a slippery slope towards death on demand. Is this the kind of debate that you had initially in Canada around the issue?
Absolutely. I was, as your introduction made clear, the legislation in Canada came about as a result of a decision of the Supreme Court of Canada, which said that the prohibitions in our criminal code against assisting somebody to take their own life were contrary to our Charter of Rights and Freedoms. And they gave Parliament a year and ultimately 2 years to craft a response if they chose to do so. And the committee of experts was struck, and then there was a joint committee of members of the House of Commons and members of the Senate looked at it. I was a member of that committee, and we heard all those arguments about this is just a slippery slope, and we now have 8 years of experience, and it hasn't been a slippery slope. There's been one amendment.
It has expanded, though, hasn't it? It sort of initially started with those, with terminal illnesses, and then it's expanded to other things.
Well, there had to be, in the original legislation, which was introduced by the government and passed by Parliament, one of the eligibility criteria was that one's natural death had to be reasonably foreseeable. And there was a subsequent court decision in Quebec which struck that down as well and said that's not included in what the Supreme Court of Canada said in 2015, and that's unconstitutional. So that was removed, and that's the extension, if you like, that has been made. So now your natural death does not have to be reasonably foreseeable. But the suggestion that has been made by some that disabled persons by reason of their disability can access MAID is wrong. You still have to meet very strict criteria which are set forth in the legislation.
And what about those with mental health issues? You know, there's been a lot of talk around that as well, whether they are part of this and can opt to have assisted dying.
Right. Well, the legislation specifically excludes mental illness. If you're the sole cause of your intolerable suffering is mental illness, then you're not eligible to access MAID, and that was originally that exclusion was to extend to last year, and then Parliament extended it further to 2027. So at the moment, if mental illness is the sole cause of your suffering, you cannot access MAID. In my view, and in the view of many people, that's discriminatory.
So you actually believe that they should be able to have that as an option,
providing they meet all the other criteria, eligibility criteria that are set forth in the legislation. And I in Canada certainly, and I'm sure in the UK the same, persons with mental illness are discriminated against in all sorts of ways, historically and even unfortunately at the present time. And to deprive them of this, what we consider to be, and the Supreme Court of Canada considered to be a human right, in my view and the view of our organization, wrong. And it is being that exclusion is being challenged in court in Canada as we speak.
Yeah, I guess for a lot of people it comes down to religious and ethical reasons for not wanting this, and I guess that's why the debate is raging on here in this country.
Yes, certainly there are people. I mean, to me, you have to go back to the basic point that this is about the individual. It's not about what society or other persons think about the situation. It's an individual situation. It's an individual choice, an individual human right. So many people, for religious or ethical or moral reasons, might say, that's not for me. I want to live out my natural life with whatever suffering comes with it. And that's fine. Nobody should interfere or pressure such a person with those beliefs to access MAID. But for those people who believe, as I do, that this is a right, that the right to access MAID for persons who qualify is reasonable, and I don't think that anybody should impose their views on me, nor should I impose my views on you.
James Cowan, thank you very much for joining us here on the programme.
You're welcome. We're watching the debate with great interest here.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Now, if you've been affected by the issues raised in this story, help is available from the Samaritans 24 hours a day. And we'll get those details for you on the screen. You can get in touch with them using the contact details on our screen. And stay with us. Coming up, we'll focus on the sinking of a tourist boat in the Red Sea.
I'm Dominic Waghorn, Sky's International Affairs Editor, covering a world that seems to be unravelling. War, unrest, revolutions.
It's not his country, it's ours.
They have succeeded for the first time in their country's history in removing a leader from power. No freedom! Sky News, the full story first. There was fighting here, but there's clearly now a lull, and they're using it to bring up more ammunition. This is a mass exodus in which Russia is hemorrhaging some of its brightest and its best. According to the local weather channel, there have been more than 2,500 lightning strikes and flash flooding, all on top of this week's lethal tornado. What stays with you most in this job is some of the people you meet. What is your worst fear about what the Russians want to do to the children?
They're just boosting demographics by stealing young people.
Would you like to take the opportunity, Mr. President, on Sky News to invite Barack Obama to come here? Mr. Trump, are you running for president? Can you confirm it?
We're going to take a look, a very serious look.
On that day, we saw your fighters killing women, killing children. Was that a mistake? Did you go too far? You couldn't control your fighters? The full force of the state is being used to crush any protest. Free wherever you get your news. It's half an hour now past the deadline that Hamas issued, and we've now seen a third barrage of rockets coming in.
Another alarm. The mood here is jittery and nervous.
We're seeing the world get more and more divided, and it's our job to try to make sense of it all.
Day of this conflict.
They keep telling us that they want aid.
And this is what's left of it.
Tanks, heavy vehicle.
Why only in America?
People want their country to work.
They want to jump in a normal life.
Why are these homes empty?
I want you to be honest with people.
That has happened within minutes.
Sky News, the full story first. Free wherever you get your news.
We arrive. A secret hospital hidden in the Myanmar jungle, treating the victims of this bloody war. This is Myanmar today. Its military rulers don't want the world to see, but we have.
I fight for my own future. I fight for my generation's future.
This is an actual crime.
They don't care for that.
Myanmar army is only a couple of kilometers away. So this is a major humanitarian disaster.
We've got your Sunday mornings covered. From the front page and the sounds of the streets to the voices of the people who make the major calls and big picture politics beyond Westminster. We'll put you at the heart of our story. A new start to Sunday. I'm ready. Are you? Join me, Trevor Phillips, Sunday mornings on Sky News.
Welcome back. Let's turn now to a developing story in Egypt, where authorities say 16 people are missing after a tourist boat capsized in the Red Sea. Matthew Thompson has the latest.
On Sunday, 31 divers boarded the Sea Story yacht for 5 days of Red Sea adventure. Within hours, it had turned to disaster. In the early hours of Monday, the boat sank. 16 people are still missing. The boat departed from Port Galib on Egypt's Red Sea coast, carrying 44 people, tourists and crew. It sank near the coastal town of Marsa Alam. It was scheduled to reach its destination of Hurghada Marina on the 29th of November. Those who have been rescued have been brought to Wadi Gimal diving centre, around 30 miles to the south of Marsa Alam. These are just a few of the lucky survivors. For the rest, a major search and rescue operation remains in place.
If the sea conditions are relatively difficult, then that could cause difficulties with small boat operations in recovering people. And also you'd need to beware of the currents. So you'd have to anticipate which direction they're going and what speed. And you can see from the systems right now that it looks as if people would be pushed parallel to the shore as opposed to towards the shore at this point.
In a statement, the Foreign Office said, "We are providing consular support to a number of British nationals and their families following an incident in Egypt and are in contact with the local authorities." We don't yet know the cause of the latest sinking, but accidents are alarmingly common. Last year, a diving boat caught fire off the coast of Marsa Alam, killing 3 British tourists. And just last month, another diving boat sank in the same area after bad weather.
Mainly, these boats are built from wood. They look very nice, they're highly finished, but they're built from wood. When they find themselves out in the Red Sea proper, away from the coast, punching north, bad things can happen. They can literally fall apart, of course, in some cases. So it's a question of using the right tool for the job, and they're really boats for inshore use.
The search for survivors continues. The Egyptian Navy is working around the clock. But in these hazardous waters, time is of the essence. Matthew Thompson, Sky News.
Stay with us. We'll be focusing on Georgia after the break. That's after the ruling party there defied protests and a boycott from the president to reopen parliament after a controversial election.
Play Sky News.
From the Sky News Centre at 7.
Now that you're up to date, we can go into a bit more detail.
Things can change incredibly quickly.
Taken by surprise.
Have you ever known a moment like this in British politics before? Yes. Cheers.
We'll start with breaking news.
Let's get the latest on the ground.
So, by the end, we'll hopefully all understand what's going on in the world just that little better.
Thousands of people have protested outside Georgia's parliament as the newly elected government convened for the first time since the controversial and much disputed election. Well, Georgia's parliamentary elections were held on the 26th of October. Many Georgians viewed it as a referendum on the country's effort to join the EU. The pro-Russian Georgian Dream Party, which had been in power for 12 years, won 54% of the votes. However, opponents say the vote was rigged and suspect neighbouring Russia of election interference. Our Europe correspondent Adam Parsons is in the capital, Tbilisi, and sends this report.
This is the sound of protest and fury. Demonstrators beating the walls of Georgia's parliament, insistent their country's election was a sham of stolen votes and fake results. Inside, the politicians of the victorious Georgian Dream Party took their seats. Outside, it was very different. Luka says he's already been arrested and beaten for protesting, but he's unrepentant.
This regime is a dictatorship. They have no regard for human life, they have no regard for human decency. All they care about is money and staying in power.
All of Georgia's other political parties are now boycotting its parliament, joining the protesters outside, telling them to keep fighting, hoping other countries will come to their aid.
We're not fighting against small coup who is now inside of this building. We're fighting against Russian interests here in Georgia. So that is why we need support from our Western partners.
It is a month since the election results sparked violent clashes amid stories of corruption and intimidation. And this is the focus of so much anger. Georgian Dream's billionaire founder, Bezina Ivanishvili, accused of turning this country into his personal fiefdom. In this poster, his face is blended with Vladimir Putin's.
These protesters don't just think that their election was rigged. They think the whole democratic basis of this country is being eroded. And after years of Georgia moving towards closer ties with the West, their greatest fear is that this nation is now moving back into the orbit of Moscow.
The theme here, amid the rain, the cold and the heavy police presence, was defiance.
Right, we're going to be here and protect our country because we have nothing else to do. Nothing else to do.
You have to protect Georgia.
Yes, we have to protect Georgia, definitely.
The future is uncertain. Georgia is now a volatile country full of anger. But the government and its billionaire backer seem sure that the fury will eventually fade, like tears in the rain. Adam Parsons, Sky News, Tbilisi.
This is The World with me, Yalda Hakim. Next up, I'll speak to childhood friends, one Palestinian and one Jewish, who have directed a documentary being tipped for Oscar success.
I'm Siobhan Robbins, Sky's Europe correspondent based here in Berlin.
In Sweden, police have seized a lethal stash.
Anyone of any age can say, I'll do that for £1 million and then have to go and shoot someone.
Yes. Sky News, the full story first. I'm Greg Milam and I'm Sky's Chief North of England correspondent.
This is insane. This was a bustling residential area.
I'm Yusra Al-Bagher, Sky's Africa correspondent based in Johannesburg, South Africa.
How difficult is this to police tonight? Off the scale.
I'm Dan Whitehead, Sky News' West of England and Wales correspondent.
weeknights on Sky News.
This is your chance. Tell people. Welcome to the Politics Hub.
Our police force has apologised. If you want to find out about Grimsby, you come to the docks.
I'm live in Jerusalem. Are you not concerned that that could lead to all-out war?
Hello there, good evening. There are fears of an upsurge in violence. What's at stake here?
You are watching the press preview, a first look at the front pages as they arrive.
I saw police being forceful, pushing young men and women to the ground as they made almost 100 arrests. Will the cold affect your voters?
Well, we have a lot of tremendous support.
Free, wherever you get your news.
The people here know that worse storms may well be on their way. I'm Martha Kellner and I'm Sky's US correspondent based here in Los Angeles.
Trust in politics is at an all-time low. What's going wrong and can we fix it? It's from Liz. She wants to know, why is there still no sign of the Labour Party electing a woman as leader?
It's sort of embarrassing. You know, it takes a very strong man to be leader, but it takes an even stronger man to support a woman for leader.
If you want to be mean to politicians, like, crack on. The activists that go out and make elections happen, I kind of feel like just don't be horrible to them. Be polite to them in the same way that they're polite to you.
Keir Starmer has got us into government with a big majority. He was completely clear before the election that he wasn't going to be able to do the two-child benefit policy, but I wouldn't be surprised if it isn't an early thing that comes along.
I went up to Gordon Brown and said, hello? No, yes, where is it? I said, found all these Tory candidates breaking land. Let me see it. This is brilliant. This is brilliant.
Significant day of this conflict.
They keep telling us that they want aid.
And this is what's left of it.
Heavy vehicle.
Why only in America?
People want their country to work.
Just want to jump in a normal life.
Why are these homes empty?
I want you to be honest with people.
That has happened within minutes.
Sky News, the full story first. Free wherever you get your news.
We arrive. A secret hospital hidden in the Myanmar jungle, treating the victims of this bloody war. This is Myanmar today. Its military rulers don't want the world to see, but we have.
I fight for my own future. I fight for my generation's futures.
This is an actual crime.
They don't care for that.
Myanmar army is only a couple of kilometers away. So this is a major humanitarian disaster.
Let's turn now to a film made by two friends. Basil is Palestinian, Yuval is Israeli. Their documentary, No Other Land, portrays the Israeli occupation of the West Bank and documents the illegal takeover of land around Basil's home and is already being tipped as an Oscar contender. And though they live just 30 minutes apart, their lives are dramatically different. Let's take a look at a clip where Basil recounts his father's arrest.
عمري 5 سنين. ذاكرتي الأولى. صحيت على ضوء كشاف. هذا كان الاعتقال الأول لأبوي.
Thank you both for joining me here on the programme. You know, watching this film, it really does feel incredibly special because it transports you not just to the West Bank, but also takes you through an emotional journey of what people are feeling there and also allows the audience to have a better understanding of a story that is there and has been there for the longest of time, but the focus has always been on Gaza, rightly, and other issues as well in the country and the region. But Basil, I want to come to you and sort of ask you why you felt this was an important story that needed to be told in this moment.
First of all, because it's my story, it's the story of my community, it's the story of in the place that I live in. And since I was a teenager, I looked for ways and the methods to transfer the story of the community. And I always felt the injustice that we are living in and the brutality that we're facing from the occupation, from the soldiers and settlers, and that our life became a routine and nobody cares about us. the people outside need to hear and to know what's going on, and the daily life under this occupation should be seen and understandable by the people outside.
Yuval, Basil saying that this is his story and he wanted to tell the story of his life, his people, and what their experiences are. I guess the question is, why did you want to help him do that?
Yeah, well, it's also the story of our people because the two people are connected. And I really believe that my people, the Israeli people, cannot be secure and safe as long as the Palestinian people are not free. And those of us who want to see a future where both of the people have self-determination and are protected have to fight for an end to this injustice and this occupation that has been going on for decades. And when I came there for the first time and I met Bassel, it was 5 years ago, together with Rachel Shore and Hamdan Balal, and we formed this collective. I was really shocked by what I saw, by the way that I saw Israeli soldiers and bulldozers destroying Palestinian houses, sheep tents, placing cement in water wells. And I felt a responsibility to do something about it. And that's how we embarked on the journey that created No Other Land.
Yuval, you talked there about your people, the Israeli people, needing to better understand what's also happening to the Palestinians. But do you think that this past year, it's been an incredibly painful year for both sides? Do you think that that has widened the gap between the two?
I mean, I think it makes things more urgent than ever. We filmed this film for 5 years before October 7th, before so many Israeli civilians were killed, before now tens of thousands of Palestinians in civilian Gaza in Gaza are killed, because we wanted to take this place to a different path, because we understand the need for a political solution. And we were filming for years on the ground the way the Israeli occupation destroys Palestinian houses, expands settlements, with the international community allowing it to happen. And we've been screaming and shouting to people, it's not sustainable. Help us, help people like me and Bassel who believe in a future of justice for everybody, reach a political solution. And unfortunately, the world has turned a blind eye. It has turned a blind eye to the military occupation for decades and allowed it to go on and on. And, you say there is now a gap. Of course, there is a lot of anger now. But in a way, it's never been more urgent to address the root causes and to bring us into a different kind of future.
Are you concerned that the incoming Trump administration will take an even more hardline approach? For example, they don't want to call the settlements. They want to refer to them as communities. And the future of the West Bank is being discussed and debated right now.
Yeah, I mean, America is the main country that's backing Israel with weapons and money and political cover, and now it's threatening the ICC with sanctions and punishments for making this arrest warrants for the prime minister and his defense minister. And yes, they're saying publicly about the settlements in the West Bank that they are Jewish neighborhoods, not the settlements, and there's no West Bank and there's no Palestinian people. This is like a threat to us Palestinians that we are living here with no protections. This is a very serious threat to our existence and our homeland. And America is leading the world, and the world should not accept this if they still believe in the international law and in the courts that they agreed to establish. And they should take a hard position, to protect the international law against Trump administrative and against Netanyahu government, in order to protect the international law and the values of human rights, and not to create more escalations in all the world.
Yuval, Basil was just talking there about the responsibility of the international community and the concerns and fears he has going forward. Just through the journey that you've had over the course of the last few years, doing this film, working with the Palestinian community, seeing what's been happening, do you have those same concerns? Do you share those same worries about where this could end up going forward?
I do. It's terrifying, and I think people don't understand the urgency in Gaza, where hundreds of thousands of people, according to the UN, especially in the north, are at risk of being killed and are being starved to death. The urgency for the Israeli hostages, the urgency for Palestinians in the West Bank that are being in Bassel's community will be just erased over the next 4 years. And I look at the United Kingdom because, we're talking to you in the UK, and things are continuing pretty much as usual. I mean, Sanctions, there's been a few sanctions on settlers, not on the entire settlement enterprise. You've not even recognized Palestine as a state. There is no, I mean, people are not stepping up to the moment. And I'm very much afraid because, you know, I'm an Israeli who is on the left, but I'm very much a minority. Politically, there's a consensus now for pretty much a forever occupation. There is no leader offering a substantial different path, and change will not come from within, at least not in the next few years. And if there is no pressure from outside, as Basil said, to lead us to a political solution for both people, things will be going much worse, and hundreds of thousands of lives, especially in Gaza, are literally on the line here.
And just briefly, Basil, finally, I mean, what do you hope for the future of the Palestinian people and Israelis?
Well, I hope that I hope this genocide in Gaza will finish as a first priority in our every moment that we are living in, and I hope that the occupation and these settlements and this brutality and the decades of occupation, I hope to live a day free from this military occupation and settlers, and I can move in my land freely as all human beings around the world. And I hope the day will be a solution that's good for everybody, that gives the rights for everybody and justice for all people around the land.
Basil, Yuval, thank you both for joining us here on the programme. Well, that's it for tonight's programme. Be sure to tune in again tomorrow. I'll be here. The news at 10 with Anna Botting is up next. Good night.